right, we are up and running. So, just to kind of review. So during this week, let me just hide that. We really got most of our material in that first day there on working with the Office Open XML and using EP Plus and so on, and our different approaches to creating summary queries, right? We saw that we could do it in LINQ to a certain degree if it was a fairly easy and straightforward one. But we also have the ability to actually create a view in the database and pull that in through our DB context. It's a read-only data set that way, which is perfectly fine, but it gives us much more flexibility because it's easy to do complex queries in SQL itself, right? So we got all that done, by the way, just to wet your or ignite your anticipation, wet your I don't know, whatever's appropriate. For next week, we're going to be starting on security and identity, uh, authentication and authorization, right? I'll get set up our ability to send emails from the application as well, so that people can get a link to reset their passwords and things like that as well. All right, that's coming up, but I'm giving a little time because, of course, a lot of people are still working on the various assignments. By the way, I put up this announcement earlier. Most of the times that students have been reaching out for help, it's all about this one main issue. Uh, I asked that you add something I didn't demonstrate, and that was on a controller in views to manage all the uploaded files, right? And one of the things that was in there was that I asked for filtering to be able to filter and look at all the uploaded documents, function documents, and filter by the function. Now, the reason why that's not very straightforward is the fact that the function itself has a lot of optional fields, including the name and the lobby sign. So it's hard. It's a little challenging, more so than what we've done in the past, to come up with like a select list that actually shows all the functions with meaningful information because so much of it can be null, right? So, that's it. That's what I say here. So, by the way, I do have the working solution for part 3A and B up. So you can have a look here. This was how I worked it out in my particular one, so that we have our drop-down list of all functions. But you can see that what we're doing is I'm taking advantage of those great summary properties, right? The summary properties that we actually had already in the class. Okay, as I mentioned here, hint, okay, great summary properties in the function class, but normally we leave all the sorting to the database, right? So we do our LINQ query, pulling from the database with our order bys and so on, strictly based on the actual fields inside the table, right? And that way you can execute as an SQL command, be very fast and efficient, because let's face it, that's what databases are great at. The database is great at data manipulation and select and so on and so forth, right? So it's the best place to do it if you can. Let me emphasize, if you can, right? In this case, okay, you might want to get the data into your own list in code first, and then you can manipulate it, right? Then you can do whatever you need. And an advantage of that is that we do have access then. If we have a list or collection of some sort of our model objects, well, then our model class with all of its summary properties, suddenly they're all available, right? And so that's what you see quite clearly. What I'm using here is actually I'm using a couple of the summary properties, right? In fact, the same ones you basically see over here in the drop-down list itself. And that way, see, so if some functions have been created, as I have in my data up here on the live version, and it just says TBA, right? Because there was no name, there was no lobby sign. So our summary property just puts to be announced, but I'm still showing the dates here so that you can help you identify the individual ones. So if I select that one, for example, and we filter for it, right? So I have one file that was uploaded related to that function, okay? Now, optional, I didn't ask you to do this, but I was motivated to think about what else we could do. So you can actually click this as a link to go to that individual function details and see all the details for that function, right? Of course, using the browser's back button, I should be able to come back here and everything is preserved. Oh, the only thing I did as a bonus, I said add a description. So I can come in here, I can edit, add a description. There we go, right? Uh, and that's just, now remember, of course, we would never allow them to edit the function because the file was uploaded to a given function. So we can't change that. And also, you wouldn't change the MIME type. Doesn't work very well if you change the MIME type of a file. When you go to download it, then it won't probably work properly, right? So the only things we would allow to be changed would be the file name, and if you optionally added the description as a property, then that would be done as well, right? So there we go. Okay, all right, so that's basically it as far as that is concerned. Now, so that again, that was a big change. So I actually did change the instructions here. Uh, right? I put it in here that it's now a bonus. And if you even bring up the 3A document, I did update it just to kind of emphasize the fact that this was a bonus to be able to filter by the function, right, within all option, right? All you're really required to do is by the file name. Now, if you've already got it done, as I said in my announcement, some students have already, shown me that they actually have a working solution, and that's great. Then you've got the bonus taken care of already, right? So, but it is a bonus, so don't get hung up on that. I highly recommend with all bonuses, you always get all the other work done first and then come back and see if you can work out a solution there. All right. Any questions about that change to part 3A? Okay. So what I thought we'd do for the rest of today is coming along to the actual assignments, there's a few other tips and tricks that I kind of shared here and we can go through, right? um, okay. Oh, yeah, a reminder, make sure you give me a copy of your Excel spreadsheet that you've set up to upload, right? So that's the other big bonus I want to talk about is in the B part, okay? Now, this always was a bonus. This has not changed, but when after you've been able to download the Excel spreadsheet, I asked you to go on and actually look at uploading an Excel spreadsheet to provide data that you can loop through it and insert the data itself, right? Uh, Your spreadsheet must include the name of each piece of equipment and the standard charge for that piece of equipment, right? So then I have a bonus here. So just get the basic functionality working. You can assume, as I did when I presented this information, it's fair enough to assume a perfect world that nobody would upload the wrong spreadsheet or that would have the information in the wrong place or anything like that, right? Another reason why I did specify that you submit your spreadsheet that is guaranteed to work properly so I can use it to do testing with. But I did have a bonus here. Uh, Check if there's already equipment record in the database with the same name. And then I noted, feel free to add a unique constraint on the name property, right? So again, let's just have a look here how it's working in the posted example. If I come to maintain lookup values, right? Well, this is one little thing maybe I should just talk about for a moment. Before I get to the other one, we were talking about, you might notice I threw an extra tab in here, right? So basically this is just so that when I first load this page, I'm not even going to get any of the data for any of the lookups. And that way, I'm not, I mean, one of the advantages of this approach was the fact that we don't go and retrieve any data, or certainly we don't get all the data for all of them and pull it all into the view every time we come back to the index, right? We only go and get data when it's specifically requested. So if you come here and never click on the rooms tab, then we'll never actually go and get that data, right? So it's more efficient that way. Well, my thought was here, why even go get any data? Just I have some basic comments here, and then all you have to do is then select a tab to actually go and see the data to work with any of the lookup values. It's optional. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's just something I wanted to share with you was that idea. So let me just show you where that is. Let me come up. That is in our lookup index. So let me just get the project up here. Use lookup index, right? So all I really did is I added yet another, right? Another nav link at the top to click on, and then a corresponding tab pane down here, right? And so in here, I just threw on, a little bit of text. So that's what's visible, and that is the default because we've set it active initially. And along with that, of course, in my lookup controller in the index, remember that's my default tab. Okay, if I don't get past when I call index, if I don't get a tab, question mark tab equals any value, I assume it's just going to be my general information tab explaining how to use the interface, right? So that's the default one, no matter what. Okay, and that's how that is basically working. So I don't want to throw anybody off because it looks a little different from what we did in class. That's all we did was we added an extra tab. So we don't even commit ourselves to pulling any data from the database. Just a slight variation on that. Okay, all right. So I came here to show you my implementation for the bonus work on uploading an Excel file, right? So basically, I have it up here. I decided to put it above instead of below. I put it below the actual list, the select list in my demonstration in class. But then I found it was kind of weird, picking something and clicking edit or delete and having all this stuff in between. So I like to have the select list right near the buttons where we decide to create, edit, and delete. So I threw it up here instead. So notice I threw in a bit of explanatory notes here along with it, okay? Put all the data right into the first two columns of your Excel spreadsheet that you're going to upload. So I'm giving them an idea. Start the data in the second row. Okay, leave room for headings name and standard charge in that first row. And the program looks for those column headings to make sure you've uploaded the correct file. So, I'm just trying to head off what we had discussed in the bonus was the idea that, we don't want to just crash and burn or things like that. We want to actually handle all the different situations and give the user feedback. So if I just click upload data without having anything here, then at least there, I'm getting a message, no file uploaded, right? By the way, the logic for this is happening in which controller? If you follow the approach that I taught in class, it would actually be in the equipment controller, right? Because that's where we actually put the code, because that's where we manipulate whether it's going to be create, edit, delete. We're always going to the actual equipment controller. If I select one here, click edit, right? And you see I'm actually at the equipment controller, okay, editing record number 11, right? Going back to the equipment list brings me back here. So that's where the code is actually executing to do the inserting of the data is in the equipment controller. So if I raise a message that I want to show inside the equipment controller, how do I get it here on the lookup controller? Anyone have a thought? View data doesn't live that long, remember? So here is a chance legitimately, finally, I have a legitimate reason to talk about temp data. Remember when we talked about all the different ways of getting information, from a controller to a view, we talked about, of course, the actual model for the class itself is one of the main ways we get data to the view, but we also have view data uh, and temp data, right? We also have the view bag, which is just as a dynamic wrapper around view data and so on and so forth, right? So anyway, here's a chance then. So what I'm doing is I'm adding it to temp data. So all I have up here at the top, I can show it to you. What the heck? I'm not giving anything away here really. So let me go back to Visual Studio. Um, in the actual lookup index, here's what I threw. Okay, I just used that same class that makes it red, text danger from basically Bootstrap. So I'm using HTML raw because in order to have, if I do have any comments where I want to break it out line by line, I can just put a BR tag in, just HTML. We've used HTML raw before, back when we did our checkboxes in the user interface, right? We used the HTML raw to actually then just provide some HTML that would be inserted right into the page without it being modified or changed in any way, just raw HTML. So from temp data, I'm just creating a value, a name value pair named feedback, okay? And I can do that right in this case, the equipment controller, add it to temp data, and then here on the index, that's how it's getting displayed, right? So that's the first time maybe you've seen a real legitimate use, good, useful implementation of temp data. Okay, actually, we did look at this page already because I was showing you this code down here. So you might have noticed that that was up there. All right, so getting back to this. So you see I have the basic message if I don't have anything loaded. Now, if I pick something that is not an Excel spreadsheet, right? That file is not an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so I'm giving that feedback. What if I choose something that is an Excel spreadsheet, but not the right one? Like appointments. Okay, that was the one from our demonstration the other day. Then I'll get the message, You may have selected the wrong file to upload. Remember, we have to have the heading's name and standard charge in the first two cells of the first row, right? Exactly, basically what was being said here, right? So that's why I'm doing that, is so that, we can have some control, quality control on, what it is they're actually going to upload. Now let me actually get that file up for a second. Let me just come here to downloads. So here's the Excel file I have ready to test with, right? So here I have name and standard charge, exactly as instructed in those notes at the top. I thought of going to the length of actually having an Excel file to download with that filled in, and then you just put the data below. But, it's pretty straightforward, so I didn't bother with that in my example here. You know enough about how this works that you could do that if you wanted to, right? Anyway, so that's how it will recognize it. It can check the MIME type, see if it's in Excel, and then check for these two values in the first two cells of the first row. And then it's pretty confident that, okay, you have uploaded the correct file. Now, I just want to point out what I've done here. So I've got values here for the standard charge, okay? Now this one, you might have noticed, is already in the system. So it is a duplicate. I did take time to go into the DB context and add the code as I suggested in the bonus to make sure that there was a unique constraint on the name of the equipment. So we can't have two pieces of equipment with exactly the same name. So this one should be rejected, right? We shouldn't be allowed to enter a second uh, equipment record named flip chart. Okay, so that one should get rejected. And this one, of course, instead of having a number that could be converted, I put in something that's an invalid format for being interpreted as a number, right? Just to give a variety of different problems that we might actually see. Okay, so that's my spreadsheet I'm going to upload. So let's actually do that one now. I come back in. Here's my equipment to add spreadsheet. The name of it doesn't matter, just as long as it has the right information in the right columns, right? So I select open, and then I have to, of course, actually click upload data, and there we go. So here's the feedback I have. Record flip chart was rejected as a duplicate, okay? Record equipment 3 was rejected because the standard charge was not in the correct format. Remember, that's when I showed you I just had like ABC, so it couldn't be interpreted as a numeric value. And then here's my summary. Finished importing 10 records with 8 inserted and 2 rejected. So that's the kind of thing, I've done this a lot for clients, and this is the kind of feedback that really makes them think, wow, this app is good. This is good stuff, right? It's always good to impress them a little bit. So you do want to give this kind of detailed feedback. So, if you want to get even, anything like this in your application, it's just a matter of ifs and try catches and so on, right? I don't really want to show you the code because then it kind of takes away the value of it being a bonus. But just think about all the things you can check. If you think back to how we uploaded data when we were doing a picture, right? We first of all checked, is the iForm file uploaded? No, right? And then we just skipped over everything. Well, instead of skipping over everything, have an else branch where then you add to this temp data message some comment about, oh, you didn't upload a file, right? Then the next check we did in uploading a picture, we checked the MIME type. Okay, so once we confirmed there actually was a file uploaded, we checked the MIME type. Well, it wouldn't take very much for you to do some searching around to find all the different MIME types that are allowed for different Excel formats and check all of them. And then in your else branch, give an appropriate message saying, that was not a spreadsheet file, right? Same type of thing. So when it comes to the actual, okay, now we actually know, and of course you can figure out how you would check for this, right? Having the correct column headings. Can you just go and access them and see if they match, right? That's pretty straightforward. That's another check you can make. Okay, now you come to the harder part, and that is where I did put up, okay, uh, also in tips and tricks, you will find a tip about save changes in a loop, right? Related to the bonus on 3B. So let me just go there. Come with me. Okay, here we are, tips and tricks. There's something that comes up as an issue, like because I'd verbally said when we talked about the instructions, hey, what you might want to do as a bonus is instead of using like an add range, we add all the data at once, is try adding one at a time, or in this case, editing. No, it's inserting in this case. Sorry, inserting one at a time. Same with your editing or inserting, doesn't matter, right? Um, we might want to do that in a loop. So we actually save each one And that way, in a try catch, we can look for any errors. So if it caused an error in the database, maybe it was because of a domain constraint, something like unique, right, or check constraint or something like that in the database, preventing the actual insert or edit, whatever the case is, right? Could even be a delete. Maybe there's referential integrity constraint preventing a delete, right? By looping through and trying one at a time and calling save changes each time, that way you can rely on the database to do your what it's good at, its proper checks and so on. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to do here. But there's a gotcha, right? The problem is our change tracker. Remember our good old change tracker? That's the one that we, uh, by doing as no tracking, we say, okay, this give me a smaller read-only set. We don't need the before and after versions of everything and so on. Well, the change tracker keeps track of everything in the queue that is waiting to be changed in the database, right? So when we call save changes, right, it's not just maybe the very last thing we did, right? It's all the things that are still waiting to be applied in terms of changes to be saved to the database are in a queue. Well, the problem is if we are reading in records one at a time, right? You know, the first one goes fine. The second one, oops, we have a problem. The database, we have a try catch, of course, as good practice. We always wrap any save operations in a try catch. It comes back with some kind of exception, maybe a DB update exception, for example. Well, in that case, okay, what are we going to do? Well, you know, we want to continue on our loop and go and try the next one. And maybe in our catch block, we would make some note, add a comment, like what we're seeing up here, a comment saying, hey, this record was a duplicate, rejected, right? That's good. So we add the comment, we're preparing information to show to the client and explain to them what's going on. But the problem is, you go back around to the loop again, you go to save changes on the next change, maybe it's another insert you're trying to insert. Problem is, if it's still in the queue, it will just fail again, okay? And when it fails, that's it. Everything stops. So it won't even attempt to do the next one. Okay. So as long as it's still sitting there in the queue, it'll be preventing anything from working until you actually get rid of the DB context, right? Or clear the queue somehow. Well, I mean, it's never been a problem for us before because normally things work and then, you know, you go back and basically, you know how the controller works. It's disposed of when you don't need it anymore and then it's recreated next time you need it, right? So you get a new, fresh copy of the DB context. So it's never been a problem, but in this case, it would be whenever you have save changes in a loop. It's an easy fix, okay? One solution, anyway, this is the one I've always used since switching to this version, right? Just call remove, okay? You go to the context, just remove, and then pass the object that was the offending object, right? So in this case, it was a equipment object, right? That's what we were trying to insert was a new piece of equipment, okay? Object based on the equipment model class, right? So down here, we might just say context remove and whatever the name for that particular piece of equipment was, the instantiated instance of it that we were trying to save, right? And that just takes it out of the queue so that now we can go on and save more objects that we're trying to update and we won't run into that problem, right? Okay, and I mentioned, of course, best practice is to try to determine why the save failed. Well, that's what our catch blocks are for, okay? And communicate the issue to the user, right? And then, of course, you know, uh, this code would go in the catch block as well. So that helps you say, okay, it's a DB update exception. I can do an if check. Is it related to a unique constraint or some other constraint, right? We can do all that by examining the message that's in the exception itself. So there's a few hints and tips for those that are interested in challenging themselves on the bonus work in the lab. But let me emphasize again, get everything else done first and then come back and work on the bonuses, right? Unless you're determined, you definitely want to get it done. And you know, there is a whole week to work on this. So it's a good amount of work, but as long as you got a start on it during break week, you should have no trouble getting it all done. And if you're just starting now, to be perfectly honest with you, it shouldn't take more than a day or so, 8 hours of work to get everything done that's in here, right? So you should be able to get that in, in between your other activities on the weekend and during the week coming up. Any questions about the hints and tips I've given you here? Okay. All right. Very good. Um, oh, maybe I don't want to give it all away, but this business, that's not from the database, right? We're trying to create an object that's made up of a string and a double, right? What if we can't pull out, okay, the actual information that was provided to actually create the object? Well, make sure in your try catch structure, not only you're looking for DB update exceptions, that wouldn't be a DB update exception because it's not coming from the database. So you need to, as usual, have a generic catch block that will catch other errors. Boy, I've just about given everything away here, but what the heck? Might as well make it easy. But you can see here, I added my new equipment. 1, 2, no, notice 3 is missing. That's because it was rejected. The standard charge was not in the correct format, right? And we only have one flip chart, right? Because our record for it was rejected. By the way, if we brought up, I think my dollar value, the standard charge for the flip chart I was trying to insert in my Excel was a different value. So you see, it didn't update anything; it just was rejected, and that was that. So the original flip chart record with its value of $60 was not touched or affected in any way. Okay, so yeah, so that's up there. Now, if I wanted to, I could just manually delete all these because they aren't being used, so I should be able to do that. Just making it ready if I want to run that demo again. Okay. All right. Well, that's most of the. Oh no, there's more, but this is a fairly long recording, so I'm going to start and stop because I do want to share at least one more thing with you. Hang on one second.